upon pages to Israel, despite tens of thousands of people being slaughtered in that year in Syria and virtually nobody being killed in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in that same year. So there's something going on. Why would a human rights organization ignore one of the gravest human rights abuses of all time? I have to go. You have to go. Actually, see what's been. It's been fantastic. Thank you for helping us out for 1 week. And so, sorry, through my
Human Rights Watch.
Human Rights Watch. And so Human Rights Watch goes where its donors want it to go. For instance, Amnesty International was given a large donation from a Saudi donor on the condition that money wasn't applied to LGBT causes. That's a bit of a problem. They took the money and then they were hugely condemned. These organisations are motivated by donations. What's going to pull in the most donations for society? The second thing, United Nations was the other one. Nations at the United Nations aren't voting when they're voting on resolutions in what is morally right or wrong. They are voting in accordance to their nation's foreign policy. And there are many more reasons for the nations of the United Nations to side with the Arab bloc, oil being one of the biggest ones, than it is one small Jewish state. And that's why Israel is routinely condemned, and the nations that are supposed to be Israel's allies, like the United Kingdom, tend to abstain from the vote. So they don't vote in favour, they don't vote against. And so each of the institutions that you mentioned have agendas, and it's that simple.
Okay. So, first argument is, all of these, would you agree that B'Tselem is exactly the same then?
B'Tselem is dependent on European funding. They get millions and millions.
So it's a Jewish organisation?
It's mixed. There's Israeli Arabs, Israeli Jews.
But it's known as a Jewish...
it's known as an Israeli organisation.
Israeli, with many Jews working there?
Yeah.
So they are all corrupt and they're all lying about the fact that Israel commits war crimes.
Is it going to be long?
Literally 5 minutes.
Are you going to join us or are you going to go?
I'm going to go. I've got to go. So I'm going to go back. Yeah.
So, good to see you.
So the number one, according to Joseph now, all of these organizations are discredited. They should not be believed. They're all lying because they're corrupt. So in essence, what you're saying, Joseph...
So why didn't they mention Syria?
Hold on a second, Joseph. Look, why they did not mention Syria equally or in that way or whatever, I can't comment on that. But what I don't assume automatically, Joseph, excuse me, is as a consequence of them not mentioning Syria in that way, if that's what you say is true, that somehow they're completely discredited and they shouldn't be listened to on anything.
So let's look at
No, but you also mentioned the United Nations. Now this is where Joseph, I think, has fallen apart. He's claiming that the United Nations, because they're taking all this oil money from the Middle East,
say that.
Or they have a lot of influence.
I said nations vote in accordance to their foreign
whatever,
policy.
Okay, foreign policy, right? So they're also hungry for oil.
No, I said that.
Okay, look, the bottom line is the inference that you're giving is that the United Nations are not balanced and honest because of the influence of the Middle Eastern countries. That's what you're claiming, right? No, that's your claim.
Yeah.
Now, how many resolutions have been passed against Israel?
Hundreds. I have
hundreds of them?
Yeah.
How many of them been enforced?
In what way? How would they enforce them? You tell me how they'd enforce them.
No, you tell me. How do they?
You asked the question.
How do they enforce them?
How
do they enforce them?
You asked the question.
You don't know how a United Nations resolution is enforced?
Yeah, tell me.
You don't know?
Yeah.
Are you not aware?
No, tell me.
Okay, one way would be sanctions.
From who?
Sanctions against Israel.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one way. Yeah. Now, I ask you the question. You said hundreds of resolutions. How many have been enforced?
So, very few.
How many?
Very few. I don't know.
I'd say probably none.
Okay. Do you know
none.
or you don't know?
None.
You know or you don't know?
Now, look at this. The Arabs are so influential. They've got the United Nations so in their fists, in their hands, that they're the ones driving the resolutions, and yet they're incapable of even implementing or getting them to implement even one.
So why would you say that?
Does that make sense?
So the boycott.
Really? Really? Joseph, really?
So what's your argument?
Really?
So you're saying that there aren't these resolutions,
Really?
or there are critical resolutions?
I think I've made my point.
No.
Very well, I think.
Are there critical resolutions?
I shouldn't even have to explain it for you.
No, so I'm not following. Are there or aren't there hundreds of critical resolutions?
You said they were.
I'm saying there were.
I asked you how. Look, resolution by itself is words. What makes a resolution significant in any measure, in any way, is if the words are backed up with action. With action.
Okay, you're missing the point.
You're missing the point.
You're missing the point.
You're missing the point.
You joined the what is the point? You joined the conversation
don't deflect.
Okay.
Don't deflect.
So
you're missing the point.
The point was the Palestinians don't have a voice.
No.
Yeah? No, that's
deal with what I just said to you.
No, I am.
Don't go to the Palestinian now. Answer the question.
Okay.
Why can the Arab nations?
Let me speak.
I'm not bullying you.
Okay, so
I asked you a specific question.
Let me answer in my own words. We started the conversation with the Palestinians don't have a voice, was your claim. I said they have a very loud voice, and that's why there have been hundreds of critical resolutions against Israel at the United Nations. This is the point, yeah? You've then said, yes, there are all these critical resolutions, but they somehow don't have a voice because there haven't been sanctions applied to
We've
Israel.
dealt with the voice.
Sorry, what's the verdict on the voice?
We've dealt with the voice. Listen.
We have not. That's the whole point.
That's
why we mentioned
Joseph,
Joseph,
please don't be naive with me. Don't be naive with me.
Please stop condescending.
No, I'm not being condescending.
You are being very condescending, sir.
This is what you do always, Joseph.
Really?
It's a tactic of Joseph. Be a man, be a big man.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Right? When I make a slight comment like this, it's not really an insult or a big derogatory comment, right? It's not like that. Don't suddenly, no.
Do the Palestinians have a voice?
Please,
yes or no? That's the debate.
Don't wither in a corner, all feeling like you've been assaulted or, no, it's not like that, Joseph.
Okay, fine. You've made your
we're
point.
men.
Hopefully
be a man.
I'll man up and be as manly as you. Hopefully
now,
one day, inshallah.
Inshallah, maybe, possibly not.
With all
possibly not. Right?
Brave man.
The thing is this.
Big man.
Did I say they have no voice? I didn't say they have no voice, zero voice.
You said the Palestinians don't have a voice.
When I say the Palestinians don't have a voice, does that mean zero voice? It means that the military occupation of Israel ensures that voice is limited dramatically. Now that would make sense. Why would that not make sense? But you know what you're doing, Joseph,
do you know
as
what
usual.
You're doing?
No, you know what you're doing?
Do you know what you're doing? You're moving the goalposts.
Joseph.
You started the statement. It's on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cameras.
It's absurd.
You said the Palestinians had no voice.
Yeah.
I've just shown you how they have one of the loudest voices in the world.
What does that mean, Joseph?
Accept that you're wrong instead of changing the debate.
What does that mean, Joseph?
Joseph, he was saying to you.
No. If I said to you the Uyghur Muslims don't have a voice, they have no voice. Yes. Yes?
So say that again?
If I said to you the Uyghur Muslims have no voice, or they have no voice, right? A lot of people would agree with that.
I would say there would be a stronger case for that given the ignoring of the international community and the lack of pressure and focus on China for the persecution. So I would say that would be a fairer statement.
Are there some Uyghurs that have come out and publicly said this is what's been happening to us?
We're not talking about that. We're talking about the biggest conflict in terms.
Joseph,
if you do a search on the internet,
Joseph, relax.
If you do a search,
I've asked you a very specific question.
I'm answering I'm giving you my answer.
I asked you, have some Uyghur Muslims come out and said,
got nothing to do with what we're
it has
talking.
Everything to do with what we're saying. It has everything.
If you can't differentiate between the United Nations and some Uyghur Muslims, then God help us.
It's a different argument, Joseph.
It's not a different.
Have some Uyghurs come out. And said publicly what they're going through. Yes. They have. So does that mean they don't have a voice? That means that nobody has spoken out, nobody can speak out, there's no evidence, no truth coming out from there at all. It doesn't mean that. So let's not just get on one word and try to make it into an argument.
The debate was whether the Palestinians have a voice.
Now
you've given a
I haven't finished. I haven't finished, Joseph.
Okay, continue.
The second part that we moved on to, which you haven't answered,
well, we're not moving
and
on
tried
to the
to
second
deflect.
Part. We're not moving on to the second part.
And you've tried to deflect
with the first.
I asked you.
I'm not having you run away and move the goalposts. We're going to deal with the first
You made an argument. argument.
Do the Palestinians have a voice? Yes or no? Your response.
Okay.
Your response.
Hold on a second.
Your response was when I gave you the United Nations, the most reported conflict in the world in the media.
Yes.
I gave you. If you look in terms of just go and Google Ngram and look at how many times Palestine has been mentioned in books over the last 70 years, you will see it's one of the most reported conflicts in all of human history. And you're saying that they don't have a voice.
Hold on a second.
And your argument against it was if two Uyghur Muslims come out and say that we're being oppressed.
Straw man.
That's what you literally just said.
No, finish your point. Finish your point. Because then I'm going to hold on a second, Joseph. One second. Joseph, 1 second. Finish your point. I'm going to give my answer. It's up to the people to decide. Then we're going to move on to the more pertinent question that I asked you at the end, which you could not answer, that sort of got you, on a sticky wicket. So we're going to deal with that. So please finish your point first. Go on.
So my point is very simple. If you agree that the Palestinians have a very loud voice and the Muslim community, the Ummah, are amplifying the Palestinian cause and the media is amplifying the Palestinian narrative and the United Nations have shone a huge spotlight on Israel and many human rights organizations are also amplifying the voice of the Palestinians, if you're saying that, then we're in a complete agreement and we've just wasted 30 minutes.
Okay, so you made your comment. Hold on, I didn't interrupt Joseph, okay? Whenever a person says, and in the normative sense, when we use the words that they don't have a voice, it is never understood in the normative sense that nobody or no voice comes out from a particular event. It's never understood like that. It's always understood that their voices are suppressed, that their voices are limited, that there is oppression, and as a consequence, they can't get their voices out. That is what it means. Now, Joseph wants to, get this term, no voice, or they don't have a voice, okay, to mean
the loudest voices in
to
the world.
mean that this is some, entirety to every single Palestinian that's ever. It's nonsense. So I've made my comment. Joseph has made his comment. Now, the thing is this.
In the United Kingdom.
I haven't finished, Joseph.
I thought you finished.
Now, the point here is, now listen to this, right? Listen to this, brothers, yes? How can one elevate one's voice more than somebody else? Think about that. You need money. Israel has a lot more money. You need good political connections. More politicians in England, about 5 years ago, this report came out. They flew to Israel, then they even flew to the United States of America, which is their #1 ally.
Which report?
Yes, it was about 6 years ago, I remember.
No.
Priti Patel, who was the foreign secretary at the time.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes? The snake, I call her the snake.
Jeez.
Yes? What does she do, the snake? She goes and meets senior Israeli officials in Israel, whilst being the foreign secretary of this country. Yes? And she gets sacked. In fact, she resigned because she was going to get sacked by Theresa May, who said, how dare you, as foreign secretary, go and talk to a foreign power, okay, without even your own government knowing. That's what you call political clout. That's what you call connections.
That's right.
That's what you call pulling the strings and playing the puppets. Okay? So please, let's not get bogged down in no voice. Israel has a voice.
The same thing.
But the problem Israel has is that when you do what you're doing to a people like the Palestinian people, it doesn't matter how loud you scream and you shout. The people are seeing what you're doing. And that's why many good people in Europe and in America, many Jews, if you go to the Palestinian charities that defend the Palestinian rights, many of them are good, decent Jews who are standing up against this. So please, you can make your point, but let's not get bogged down in this nonsense.
So I would first of all like to thank you. I would first of all like to thank you for basically making my point again. And so I will just reiterate, and I'll give you further examples. You mentioned there are many Jewish voices that are coming out in support of the Palestinians, and you're right. In America, there are many Jews that support the Palestinians.
And here.
Less so here, but certainly in America, there are many progressive, because there's far more Jews in America.
Progressive.
Yeah, progressive is in progressive
so they're not,
politics.
Not religion. Okay, not religion. Okay.
Also religion.
We have to be careful because progressive Jews often nullifies the
overwhelming
Jewishness.
majority of American Jews are progressive Jews as well.
Yeah.
Orthodox, you're a minority in America, but that's a massive tangent we don't need to go into. But effectively, if you go to any city in the UK, you're not, or any university, you're unlikely to find a Uyghur society. You're unlikely to find a Kashmir, in terms of the conflict, a free Kashmir society, or a free any of the many conflicts around the world with far greater death tolls and far greater oppression. You won't find societies for those conflicts in British universities. You won't find a Uyghur solidarity campaign in every single city in the UK. You won't find it for the Palestinians. You have the Palestine solidarity campaign in every single city in the UK. You have the Scottish Palestinian solidarity campaign, and you have in every university a Palestine society. The overwhelming majority of the members of the Palestine society, our Palestinian society, the Palsocs in every university are not Palestinians. The overwhelming
Let him finish. Don't interrupt, please.
The overwhelming majority of their members are non-Palestinian. If you look at the actual reporting of the conflict, it's out. This conflict, in terms of a positive,
try to shut them up.
Please, brother, please.
A positive. I'll give you an example, a real example.
Please,
everybody talks about the Jewish lobby or the Israeli lobby. At the last, not the latest one, but the one before that, when Corbyn was in, the last Labour conference that Corbyn ran was a sea of Palestinian flags. Could you imagine if the Conservative Party had their conference and it was a sea of Israeli flags? They would say, look at the Zionist puppet masters, the Zionists control the Tories, yet nobody talks about the Palestinian lobby when the entire conference was a sea of flags.
There's a reason for that.
Anyone can Google this.
Exactly.
It's
not the same
Please,
argument.
let him, he's making all sorts of arguments. Let him finish.
I'm giving examples of the
They're very weak. But I'll let you finish. No, but we'll let him finish.
I'm giving examples of the amplification of the Palestinian voice. If you're going to say, does Israel have a voice? Yes, of course Israel has a voice. I'm stood here as a British Jew, I'm not Israeli, and I'm advocating for Israel. There are many Christians that advocate for Israel. There are many people that advocate for Israel, like there are many people that advocate for the Palestinians. In terms of conflicts, it is the most amplified conflict in the world. So all we're addressing is your initial statement. Do the Palestinians have a voice? Now, if you'd have said, who has the louder voice, the Palestinians or the Israelis, that's a different argument. What you actually said was the Palestinians don't have a voice. And I'm simply showing that that is objectively false, incorrect. They have a louder voice than the Uyghur, they have a louder voice than Rwandans, they have a louder voice than the Yemenis, they have a louder voice than any other conflict.
They have the right to be...
Hold on.
I agree they have a right to a voice.
Okay, hold on. How long has the conflict of Israel and Palestine been going on now?
73 years.
Did the Rwanda conflict last that long?
No, but there have been other conflicts that have lasted longer.
Hold on a second. Has the Uyghur conflict lasted that long?
No, but we can talk Pakistan and Kashmir. We can talk any of the conflicts on India's northern border.
Joseph, answer my question.
I'm answering your question.
I'm talking.
I'm not going to be.
Joseph, I'm asking you specifically on the points you raised.
So I'm giving you an answer.
No.
Because you're trying to say that it's a longer conflict.
So now you're talking about. You didn't mention Kashmir, did you?
The conflict is not the same.
I mentioned it earlier. I did.
You didn't mention it now.
I just did.
You just mentioned. You mentioned Rwanda. You mentioned China. The Uyghur. Right.
Yeah, fine.
So when you mentioned those, some of those lasted for 8 months, a year, right? All I saw in the news when the Rwanda conflict was going on was people having their arms and their bodies hacked. It was on all the time.
Yeah, I agree.
But it lasted the conflict itself lasted a very short period of time. So again, your point on that is moot. What I would say here is this. When I say the Palestinians don't have a voice, we can be pedantic, which is what Joseph is being.
Really pedantic.
He's talking about the advocacy groups that have been set up. They've been set up over the last 70 years as a consequence of the deliberate and continuous humiliation and oppression of the Palestinian people. And that has magnified over the years as technology has changed, and now Israel can't keep a lid on it anymore, because every Palestinian now has a TV camera. Every Palestinian now has a microphone. So they film and they get the information out. So yes,
they have a voice. Thank you. Okay, we just wasted an hour.
No, Joseph. Again, this is a silly argument. But anyway, I think we've worked this argument to death.
I agree.
We let the people decide. We let the people decide. Now, the issue that you said, that the United Nations, as a consequence of pressure or influence from the rich or Arab nations or whatever, are basically doing these sanctions.
What I said. You're putting words in my mouth.
What did you say?
I said nations vote in accordance with their foreign policy interests.
Fine. And their foreign policy interest would be to... hold on a second.
Just before we waste another 30 minutes.
No.
Do you agree with that statement? Do nations at the United Nations vote in accordance to their interests in terms of foreign policy?
Absolutely.
Okay, then we agree. Fine.
We agree on that point. But you want to agree on the inference of that point, which I disagree with.
What's the inference?
What is the inference? The inference is that you're saying that the United Nations are not credible.
No, I didn't say that.
Hold on a second, you did. Because when I said to you that they said...
All 10 of them.
Hold on a second, because I said, apart from Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, B'Tselem, right, an Israeli organization for the protection of the Jews and the Jewish... the Palestinians, right? And I said the United Nations, you wanted to tarnish the reputation of the United Nations because you said it's not... In effect, the inference is their view is invalid because the nations are simply doing things in their own interest, for their own interest. Now, the issue is, if the nations...
Why don't you ask me what I'm saying instead of putting words in my mouth?
If the nations are doing it out of their own interest to condemn Israel for the persecution of the Palestinian people and passing all these resolutions, which you said were hundreds, I said from that it would be logical and reasonable to assume that those interests that they have would also ensure that they enforce those resolutions. Otherwise, they're just words. They're meaningless. So I asked you the question, Joseph, how many resolutions have these interests of these nations and the external interests and pressures that they have as a consequence of doing what's best for themselves, have they implemented against Israel? How many?
No, do you know why they haven't?
So they haven't been, you agree?
No, do you know why though? Do you know what the mechanism is?
Well, before we get to why, I want to ask you,
it's because
have
America
have they?
vetoes.
Have they?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
America vetoes.
So America,
Yes, he's right. I agree on something now, Joseph.
So
America vetoes.
Very quickly, just so it doesn't look like I'm running away. I have to leave at 6:30, so we've got 9 minutes. Just as
fine.
So just to get on to the America thing, Israel has basically one friend in the world, more or less, and that is America, the United Nations.
Well, and Australia. And Micronesia. Micronesia.
Oh, yeah, that powerhouse, Micronesia.
Well, you said only one friend.
Okay.
You said only one friend.
Okay, let me rephrase that. They have one friend
It
that has
about,
the ability.
It has about four or five that veto. Sometimes 4, sometimes 5. Australia,
don't have
America.
the power to veto.
Well, no, I didn't say they.
Okay, sorry.
But I said when they vote.
Okay. Anyway, let's not get lost in the weeds, as you were saying before.
Since Netanyahu came to power, India as well has a...
I would say India and Israel are actually close now. I'd agree with that.
That's
surprising, isn't it?
Inshallah, Israel and all the Gulf states soon. Inshallah.
You know what's surprising about that, Joseph?
Thank you. The Muslims are saying inshallah.
So you have a fascist government in India. And by the way, before you make any assertions, my family is from India. Both of my parents are from India.
I've got Muslim Indian family.
I'm ethnically Indian.
I've got Muslim Indian family.
Born in this country.
I've got Muslim Indian family.
Fine.
So I'm not going to say
Good for you. But Modi, the president of India, was banned to travel to America when he was the head of Gujarat.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay, the governor, because he was directly implemented in the genocide that took place in my parents' hometown, Gujarat, where over 1,800 Muslims, and I have Hindu workers that used to work for me years ago, who confirmed it with their own eyewitness, that the women were being raped on the streets and burnt, and the people were being killed. And this person, Modi, that your president shook hands with, has got blood on his hands. He's a fascist, racist ideology, the Hinduva.
He's also shook hands with most of the Western world.
Fair enough. But so please don't look at it as something positive. I see it as something negative.
So I didn't say whether it was positive or negative. I agreed that Israel is beginning to get closer relations.
Beginning to get close to fascist and racist, yes. Well, that's what he is.
If you want to talk fascist and racist, we know that literally almost every Muslim regime that surrounds Israel.
Oh, really? Okay. Let's get to
Assad.
Fascist. Please.
No, he's not.
Okay.
Assad's not a fascist.
Listen. I don't make two wrongs a right.
He's your friend. That's
okay.
Why.
There are many tyrants in the world.
Why he stays in
there
power.
are many tyrants in the world, right? I don't say Assad is a good person. No, but it's got nothing to do with what we're talking about. So I want to ask you, how many sanctions have been implemented by the United Nations against Israel to make it comply?
I'm not aware of any sanctions against Israel.
Right, none. Because American vetoes, all right. So there you go. So the Palestinian people can have as loud a voice as they want to.
So we agree.
It's irrelevant.
So we agree.
It's irrelevant.
Okay.
The people can come.
This feels like the most unproductive conversation I've ever had at Speaker's Corner, because we've debated for an hour or however long it's been. We've made an awful lot of points, and to both the things you've argued with me, you've basically agreed.
Joseph, if you're going to try to hoodwink the crowd,
I'm not hoodwinking
in sort of thinking that somehow you've made some profound points.
You started the conversation.
It's quite frankly
I've
laughable.
Demonstrated how the Palestinians
it's embarrassing.
have a loud voice.
You're embarrassing yourself,
I've
really.
demonstrated how the
you
Palestinians
really are.
have a loud voice.
You're embarrassing yourself.
Okay, fine.
Because I'll tell you why, Joseph. I'm not straw-manning your argument.
The debate was, do the Palestinians have a voice?
Joseph, relax. I agree that you said that they do have a voice, and that voice is huge. Did I strawman your argument? No. But you just constantly want to strawman my argument. I did not say, and in the normative sense, as I explained, it does not mean that they have no voice at all.
They have one of the loudest voices in the world, and we've just demonstrated how they have one
now,
of the
why
loudest
could that be, Joseph? Why could that be, Joseph? What could be the logical reasons of that mass voice that you said that exists?
For the purpose of this debate, it's almost inconsequential. If we both agree that they have one of the loudest voices in the world, why did we just
I didn't say that.
Well, I'm
saying from your paradigm.
Okay.
From your paradigm,
do you disagree?
they have from your paradigm, you're saying they have one of the loudest voices in the world.
Yes.
Why is that, Joseph?
Why is that? Because they're principally the biggest reason for that is for most Muslims in the world, Palestine is a more important conflict than what's going on in the Central African Republic.
I didn't ask you that question.
I'm answering your question in my words, not your words.
No.
What's going on in the Central African Republic, what's going on in Yemen, and because it's at the forefront of most
You're contradicting yourself now.
Because it's at the forefront of most Muslim causes, it's one of the most impassioned. They raise more donations from the Muslim community than any other conflict in the world.
Okay. Joseph, you've contradicted yourself.
That's fine. You can tell me how
I'll tell you how you've contradicted yourself.
Once I finish my point.
Please, go ahead.
And so because it is at the forefront of so many Muslims' thoughts, that when it comes to any of these institutions, whether it's the United Nations, whatever it may be, it's something which is of importance to Muslims, and that's why the voice is amplified. If this was a conflict taking place in Al-Andalus or in North Africa, it would not have the same level of attention because it wouldn't have religious significance to billions of people.
Okay, this is where Joseph has contradicted himself without even realizing.
Right.
Earlier, Joseph said that a lot of these advocacy groups are in the universities are non-Muslims.
No, I said non-Palestinian.
Okay, listen.
It's on camera.
Okay, Joseph. And when you go to a march here, Joseph, against Israel, it's not just Palestinian people. It's not just Arab. It's not just Arab people.
But there's an awful
it's
lot
not
of
just
Muslims.
Asian. It's not just Muslims. Right? It's
not just.
It's actually, if you look, at times I see predominantly white, middle-class English people.
So it depends. So some of the Palestine solidarity campaigns
I
agree.
When I was on the anti-war march here against the second Gulf War, 90%, 95%, I would say, to me, outwardly, they looked non-Muslim, white, middle class.
But we're not talking about.
So when you bring Islam and you bring Muslim into it, this is not just Islam and Muslims. The entire world.
You don't understand how
the
amplification
entire
works.
world is crying out.
You don't understand.
And they are saying that this is an injustice. Now,
So you're
Joseph,
agreeing again. The entire world.
Joseph,
You're agreeing again.
I was talking about the
Metaphorically,
Palestinian
yes. Okay.
people themselves have an embargo. They have restrictions on internet. They have restrictions on who can go in. And you're telling me that they can have as loud a voice as the Israelis who don't have those restrictions? Come on, for God's sakes.
I never
Joseph,
once said, and it's
please.
on camera, I never once said who had the loudest
Please.
voice. I never once said that. That's
So-
something you just introduced.
So-
I said categorically the Palestinians have one of the loudest voices in the world.
Joseph, so you've admitted, we've moved on from that, let the people judge.
I
You've
do have to- I do-
that's
I
fine.
say
You've
6:30,
admitted
and I've got
that
my
the
1
United
minute.
Nations sanctions are not implemented because
Fine.
America vetoes them.
Final
I
thoughts.
agree, America vetoes them. The question that people need to ask themselves, why does one nation have the power to veto something that the entire globe may disagree with?
Any
you have to
nation-
ask the question.
any
now,
nation
what
is
you
on the
now what you would
Security
have to
Council.
argue, this would be absurd, of course, is that America is right and Israel is right, and sometimes Australia, I think Micronesia, these 3 or 4 nations are right, and the entire world, when it condemns what Israel does and passes these resolutions, are all collectively wrong. And that's what you would have to argue, Joseph.
So I'll give you the closing thoughts because I do have to go. So if that were the debate, I would have presented many different arguments. The debate wasn't that. The debate was, do the Palestinians have a loud voice or not?
That wasn't
And
a debate.
Okay, fine. Okay, in that case, there was no debate. And everybody, you've just wasted
That's ridiculous.
50 minutes. Okay.
That's ridiculous.
And I have to go, so you can have the closing
That's
thoughts.
fine.
Thank you for the
The debate
conversation.
was not purely based on one thing. That's why Joseph brought up many things as well, right? Now, when you build your case in relation to an injustice, the sensible thing to do is to bring as many credible witnesses as you possibly can. And so it's a multifaceted reason as to why the Palestinian cause is being ignored. Because you see, when you just have words, which is what the United Nations basically are doing, they are worthless if they are not implemented and followed with action. It's just hot air. You see, if I see a woman being murdered, killed, a child being killed and murdered, and I have the power, I have the capacity, I have the influence, I have the arms, I have the economy to be able to stop that, and I don't stop it, I am complicit in that crime. And if I just said, oh, but I said it's a bad thing, I said to the person, you're doing a bad thing, and I leave it at that, this is not sufficient. No sensible person would say that was a sufficient reaction to a brutal attack like this. So when they give their speeches at the United Nations, when they pass their resolutions against Israel, and when they are not implemented, when Israel is not pressured and forced to rectify its brutal occupation of the Palestinian people, that is that is tantamount like me just telling the rapist, the murderer, the killer, who I have the opportunity to stop easily. It's tantamount of me just saying, oh, that's a bad thing you're doing there. That's what it's tantamount to. And this is what these people are doing. So just because they pass a resolution doesn't mean anything. Actions speak louder than words. And there is no action. And there needs to be action. Because what's happening there is atrocious. What's happening there, and when I say they don't have a voice, they don't control media. They don't have influence on media. They don't have their own. They don't have their own airport, for God's sake. They don't have their own access, control of their internet or their telecommunication. They can be shut down in a second. If they're suffering, the witnesses can be removed. They can be threatened. They can be jailed. So we know this goes on. It's happening. If a country truly has nothing to hide, Why doesn't he allow the media to enter? Why does he not allow them to witness what's happening? Why only snippets that they release? Clearly, this is an agenda. This is a propaganda that they wish to do. And most of the world, quite frankly, are not buying it anymore. We don't accept it anymore. Because now, as I said, every Palestinian now, he has the camera, he has the microphone, he records what's happening, and he shows the world. And these are children being brutalized, these are women being brutalized. This is wrong and this is an injustice. And I don't care if this injustice was being done by a Muslim against a Jew, I would be standing here and I would be talking against the Muslim. Because our religion does not allow us to be unjust and unfair to people, regardless of your color, your creed, your religion. And when there is a Muslim, he does something, I stand up, I say you're wrong. When somebody was trying to go approach the black brother Christian here who was shouting and screaming, I walked over to stop him. Don't throw water on him. Even though he was abusing the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was abusing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in reality he was abusing himself, because you can't abuse the Prophet of Allah, you can't abuse sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you can't abuse Allah, you are just abusing yourself. But we live in this country, we abide by the laws, and the law of the land is you can't touch him. So we abide by those laws, those principles that Islam puts in us. So an injustice is an injustice. And we have a beautiful example of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we have a beautiful example in the Quran where Allah says your dislike or your distrust or your hating a people should not make you unjust towards them. So we stand up against injustice. At the moment, the problem that we have is that you have people like Joseph and the other Jewish person I was talking to. They're justifying what Israel is doing. They're constantly trying to give reasons. Abuse is abuse. There are no excuses. And I'm not saying that all of the fault is on one side. Yes, there are some Palestinian people who do things that are wrong. I wouldn't agree with those things. But you have to see it in the light of the entirety of what's happened. These are people who've been systematically abused and humiliated. Their homes have been taken. Millions are in refugee camps, living in squalor. They hold on to the keys from 70 years ago that one day I will return to my land. Torturing them like this. And these people are still standing up against the Palestinians, and they're supporting the Israelis. Wallahi, they've suffered so much in the Second World War. And what surprises me is there are people that have suffered so much at the hands of a tyrant of Hitler that they now become the tyrants themselves. They become the oppressors themselves. And not only that, but they justify the tyranny, they justify the oppression, they justify the theft of land, of property of these people. How is this acceptable? So yes, it's a passionate subject, but my brothers and my sisters, let it be a war with the pen, because today the war is with the pen. The war is with the speech. And that's the capacity that we are in, that's the ability that we have, so we do it to that extent, inshallah. Our religion expects us to do justice and be just and be fair. We don't target innocent people. We do not say this is a Jewish issue, that all Jews are like this. We should not do that. We should refrain from such language. Because and I've heard some of my Muslim brothers and sisters, if we start hating all Jews, then what difference is there between us and the Jew who hates all Muslims? We need to be reflecting on the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, abide by the Sunnah, and inshallah that is our solution. Assalamu alaikum.